Hi, my name is Ryan Pinkerton, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services for the San Luis Coastal Unified School District. We've been doing some outreach with our community forum meetings recently in regards to the closure of Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant and the effects on the school district. And so what I would like to do is offer this presentation to those of you who are unable to attend one of those forum meetings that we've had. We've had one in San Luis Obispo, one in Los Osos, and one upcoming next week in Morro Bay. And we've also held 3 staff forums. So if you go to the district website, you'll see scroll down just a little bit, right here where it says Community Forums on Blue Ribbon Committee, so you can click on that. And then as right at the top, we actually have an online survey that we would ask you to do after you go through the presentation and listen to my presentation. And then currently, the actual presentation itself that we've been giving is listed here. And after this video is completed, we'll be adding the video to the website as well. So the impact of Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant closure on the school district itself is basically the loss of unitary tax. So we receive property tax dollars that basically is the main revenue source for us at San Luis Coastal, and a portion of that is our unitary tax. So with the Diablo Canyon closing, the estimation is that it's about a loss of $8 million in unitary tax. And so that's the reason why we're having these reduction meetings, why we're talking about it, is to kind of get a plan together for how we're going to deal with this long term for the school district. So the budget in general is a basic aid school district in San Luis Coastal. What that means is that our property taxes are actually more than we would receive if we were a state-funded district per pupil funding. So we get to keep the extra funds that come to the district. And so that unitary tax, a big part of that in the past has been the extra funds that we've received from Diablo Canyon. So our budget ourselves, in terms of trying to deal with this $8 million deficit, and loss of revenues, we started last year. So we started at the district office level and making some cuts. And so you can't really read it right now in the presentation, but if you pull the presentation off the website, you'll be able to see them. And what you'll notice is most of the reductions are all at the district office level. So trying to keep them away from the school sites as much as possible. Roughly over $2 million in reductions we made last year to kind of begin this process. This year we're looking at another $1 million of reductions, mainly through, we have some declining enrollment at some of our elementary sites, and so we'll be losing some staff because of that. And so that's where a lot of those reductions, as well as some personnel here at the district office again, to help us get this $1 million. So roughly in the 2 years, 17-18, 18-19, we're going to cut about $3 million of the $8 million that we're planning on losing in terms of Diablo Canyon revenue. But we still need to make a plan for the next $3 to $5 million, and that's why we've been holding these community forum meetings to discuss. And Dr. Prater, because of the Diablo Canyon loss, put together a blue ribbon committee. So it was a group of individuals outside the school district that had are not employees of the school district, work outside, and he pulled them together to share all of our information and for them to come up with recommendations. So if you click on the next slide, so this basically goes through our revenues, our overall revenues, but the Blue Ribbon Committee was again put together to kind of look at things and to give us ideas of what we could do in the future. And so I'm going to be addressing those after this budget session. So the revenue itself of the school district, most of our revenue, like I said, comes from property taxes, which includes the unitary tax. We receive a little bit of money from the federal government, Title I, Title II, Title III. A little bit of money from the state, so some of our old categorical dollars they're called. We receive a little bit of money from our local contingency, which can be our unused sites that we lease out, and also our PTAs, PTOs, boosters who pay for field trips or assemblies or activities at school sites, so some of those dollars pass through the school district, which is a big part of it. And then the state of California makes us show the amount that they put in for teachers' retirement system. So that's the STRS on behalf percentage. It's kind of a wash because the amount that we receive in revenue is taken out in expenditures. So on the expenditure slide, in terms of where most of the dollars go for a school district, of course, is people, right? So 85% of our budget goes to people. And we're a people organization, a people business. So out of that, about 54.6% are certificated staff. And so those are your teachers, counselors, anybody who needs a certificate or a credential basically to work at a school district is kind of put into that realm. Classified is everyone from our, again, non-certificated staff. So it's our bus drivers, our custodians, our secretaries, our our grounds people. So anybody else that works for the district. And then we've actually pulled out management. So all of our administrative costs are pulled into this management section, which is about 6%. So again, all those added up, roughly 85% of our district. And when we did a budget check a few years ago, basically the experts, what they tell you is that you want to keep it in that 85% realm. You don't want it to get higher than that because then you don't have money for materials and supplies and buying new buses or new equipment or things for your school district. So it's critical that we stay within that realm. Books and supplies represents about 4.5% of our budget. Services and operations is about 9.3%. And we've kind of broken that up into all of these different areas that you can see on the slide. We have a little bit of money that goes to equipment outlay and then other outgo as well to kind of make up the overall expenditures. Again, certificated is the biggest part of our expenditures, which is what it should be, right? So they have a thing called the J90, which is a report that the CDE, the California Department of Education, puts out each year. And it gives a breakdown of every single school district and how many certificated staff you have, FTE, full-time equivalents, and it gives different pay levels and then the number of students. So for us, this is our county that I've listed here, but if you go to the next slide, so for us at San Luis Coastal, we have about 473 staff, 7,228 ADA, which represents about 15.27 on average. So that's the number of students we have per staff, certificated staff in our district. Does not include administration or the classified employees. When you compare us to other districts within our county, Lucia Mar, Atascadero, Paso Robles, as well as I pulled in Santa Maria, because a lot of times employees, people want to compare ourselves with Santa Maria in terms of pay. So I've listed them too. And so what you'll see is we have a very low number of certificated staff per student. So and that is, so again, a lot of our dollars are put into our certificated staff. In terms of a total breakdown, so this is a really recent report that we put together. In terms of it, October 2017, so for this school year, you'll see certificated staff, and again, this is all the schools that are within our county here that are listed. San Luis Coastal, about 49% of our employees are certificated, which is a little on the high side. Classified employees, San Luis Coastal, 45% of our employees are classified, so on the lower end. And then management, after we made those $2 million worth of reductions last year, it brought this number down significantly. So we're currently at 5.5% of our employees are management, and which is the lowest number in our county. So this Blue Ribbon Committee got together and they did a presentation, which you can click on and you can see the full report if you'd like. But it broke it down into kind of two key areas. One was revenue enhancements. How can we not just look at cuts, but are there ways that we can increase revenue in our school district? And then, of course, what are the things, the cost containment things that we can also do to try to bring our expenditures in line with our revenues? End of the day, we have to balance our budget. Otherwise, you're taken over by the state and bad things happen. So on the revenue enhancement side, we'll start with those. So the first idea that came out of the Blue Ribbon Committee was a potential parcel tax. So what a parcel tax is a parcel tax is a flat tax. So it's the same amount for every single parcel within our school district. So in this case, basically, so again, what we talked about was a flat tax, augmenting the general fund, giving us dollars. These taxes require a 2/3 majority, so very difficult to pass. They're levied on a per parcel basis, right? So every single parcel. Unlike Measure D, which was a progressive tax of $49 per every 100,000 of a value, so a $1 million house would pay $490 a year. A $500,000 house would pay $250. So that's a progressive depending on the amount. In this case, a parcel tax is a flat amount. So if you have $1 million home, you pay $49 or $29 or whatever the amount is, and if you have a vacant land, you would pay the same amount. So it's flat across the board. The proceeds are flexible, so they can be used to augment general fund. Oftentimes, there's specific areas that the parcel tax is focused on. And then in the end, we can also do things like having a senior citizen exemption, right? So we know people are on fixed incomes, difficult for them to add any more costs, so super tough. If you look at the map, what this will show you is that parcel taxes are not very prevalent, right? So all of the white areas are places where they have not passed a parcel tax. The blue areas is where they've had at least one, and then the green areas where there's actually been multiple. A lot of basic aid school districts are along the coast. And so what we find is that throughout these areas, a lot of the districts that are actually able to pass parcel taxes are basic aid school districts like San Luis Coastal. The parents have become accustomed to the types of programs they want and activities for their kids, music, art, those types of things. And so they're willing to pay a little extra to ensure that those programs are in place. So the parcel tax itself, what would that actually generate for the school district? So based on the number of parcels that you have, right? So $49 per parcel would be about $2 million for the district. $200 per parcel would be $8.1 million for the district. So these can be, parcel taxes can be something that can last for a couple of years. It can be an evergreen to where it lasts forever. So those are things that have to be built in, have to be discussed. And then the parcel tax dollars come as people pay their property tax bills. So the pros and cons of each one, right? So in this case, a parcel tax, yes, it's a great source of revenue for the district. That would definitely help in terms of that next $3 to $5 million worth of cuts that we have to make, right? However, we do realize right now it's super tough. You know, people in Los Osos, Morro Bay, dealing with sewer costs, increased fees for water bills, those types of things. Here in San Luis, you know, the city's also looking at potential, increases in taxes as well. And so having that 2/3 majority makes this very difficult to do, to actually pass. And so we'll see what type of momentum, what people are thinking in terms of this. And should the board decide, we would actually go out and probably do a study to see if the public would be willing to basically support us to pass a parcel tax. So the next revenue enhancement strategy that the Blue Ribbon came up with was looking at currently our surplus properties. Right now we have surplus properties that we don't use, so Morro Elementary School, Sunnyside, Vicente property, which is behind Pacific Beach next to Target in San Luis Obispo. We have our Grand Avenue site, which is currently rented by a private school, SLOCA, over by Cal Poly. And then we have our Avila Beach schoolhouse there, which is actually a development currently that's being developed, and the schoolhouse itself is going to be turned into a bed and breakfast, and the district receives revenue from each of those units. So what they said was, it's time for us to basically look at these sites and decide, are these things that we want to keep long term, or should we look at potentially selling them and taking those dollars, maybe putting them into a maintenance fund, which would help our general fund. So we've been leasing these sites out since like 2002, made good money that goes directly, because they're leased, goes directly to our general fund. But we're at a point now with a few of these sites, Morro Elementary I would say, and probably the Vicente property and even Sunnyside, where they're going to require a lot of money to upkeep them, to maintain them. So, $2 to $3 million at those sites. So is it worth it? Is it worth keeping them versus renting them out and using the money for our general fund purposes? So that is something that, again, the Blue Ribbons Committee basically said, hey, we should study this a little bit more. We should dig into it and talk to the board. Our board has always been focused on keeping our sites in the past. And so actually potentially selling those sites is something that I think they were kind of told us that we should look into. Not a quick fix. So the next Blue Ribbon Committee was basically, they heard about our Cayucas issue with Coast School and the Cayucas students coming to Morro Bay High School. Now we love having the Cayucas kids at Morro Bay High. In fact, it helps the enrollment at Morro Bay High School so that they're able to have better athletic teams and offer more programs for kids. So it's actually nice to have those 100, 150 kids that come over from Cayucas each year. And so at the time when the Blue Ribbon Committee kind of made this recommendation, this was not put in place. But happy to tell you that this actually is something that Coast Unified, as well as Cayucas District and San Luis Coastal was able to come to an agreement. So we are going to be receiving these revenues. So 22% in next year, 55% the following year, and then 100%. So that is going to be an ongoing revenue source that's going to help us deal with this loss of revenue. And then the last one was a foundation. So they, you know, when we were initially heard about Diablo Canyon shutting down, we got together with the county of San Luis Obispo, the cities, and the school district, and we worked with PG&E to set up a mitigation agreement. So we had a huge agreement, lots of meetings, come together to try to find a way that we could mitigate this loss of revenue. The county, the cities, the district would receive some funds so that we could slowly deal with this loss over time. Unfortunately, the PUC decided that they couldn't pass that they wouldn't, they didn't have the authority to pass that mitigation on to the ratepayers. So we're currently working with Bill Moaning and Jordan Cunningham, our state assemblyman and senator, to see if we can pass some legislation now to get that same mitigation agreement approved. We won't know about that for sure. It's gone through a couple committees right now, moving forward. You know, hopefully over the summer we would know if it was passed, but ultimately we have to wait till September, October to know whether or not the governor would veto that bill. So it's something that, again, is in the works, we're trying to do. But the reason why I bring that up is that a portion of those mitigation funds, $10 million, was going to start up a foundation. So the school district itself, we cannot invest our money. We have to keep it in the county treasury, super safe. But if we had a foundation that had some nice seed money built into it, that money could be invested, and again, this foundation could hopefully build. We have a couple of great resources right here in our own backyard. Both Cuesta College as well as Cal Poly have excellent foundations, have done great jobs with those. So trying to kind of mirror those two foundations groups and try to do the same here in San Luis Coastal was something we wanted to do. So again, we're up in the air right now whether or not we're going to receive any seed money. We won't know until the fall, but we have gone ahead and started our foundation. So put the paperwork in, got it established to do what we can to move forward. Again, very difficult to start a foundation from the ground up with no funds. Having that $10 million would be a great way to start some cool programs and do some things and get people excited about giving. But we're going to try to do it even without the seed money to try to get it established and to build forward. So those were the revenue strategies that the Blue Ribbon Committee came up with and discussed with us. Again, what you're going to find is some of those things are within our power as we go through both the revenues as well as the cost containment. So things that the school board can do tomorrow, right? They can vote on this and we can move forward. And there's other things that are kind of out of our hands. So will we receive the seed money for the foundation? Is it even possible to pass a parcel tax in our community? We don't really know. So as we go to the cost containment issues, which are basically cuts in our expenditures, the foundation, or the Blue Ribbon Committee had said, hey, keep these two things in mind as you move forward. Number one, try not to do layoffs. Whenever you have layoffs, pink slips with employees, they never forget about it. So if we can make these reductions over time without doing layoffs and just do it through attrition, through employees leaving and not hiring back, that's the way to go. They said, you know, continue to monitor early retirement options as a way, you know, again, to avoid layoffs. For the past few years, it really hasn't penciled out to actually do an early retirement option for employees. So, you know, taking money and giving it to employees who are leaving versus just keeping the money when people leave and you hire newer teachers or newer staff at cheaper salaries and keeping that for the organization. So that's been what we've been doing the past few years and has been positive. And again, we would have to really, for me, only think about that if there were potential layoffs in the future. So those are two things that the Blue Ribbon Committee had tied into us. And then actually looking at what to do. So as I showed you with the J90, as I showed you with our kind of our county comparison, we have a lot of money, as it should be, built into class size. So that's, in the classroom, teachers in the classroom, support staff for classrooms. That's where the dollars should go. Now that said, should we, that's also the potential place to cut back in some expenditures. So, and what the Blue Ribbon Committee said was, hey, listen, we're currently at 23-26, so 23 students per teacher in K3, 26 412, and the negotiated maximums that we could go to, right, that the board tomorrow could decide on, would be K3 28, 412 32. So the Blue Ribbon Committee said, hey, is there somewhere in between? Is there somewhere where we can raise these up a little bit, maybe not go to the max at this point, but somewhere as a piece of this, right? So as we're looking at, this $3 to $5 million plan that we have to put together, is a little bit of it revenue, is a little bit of it class size or class size increases. So that was one of the things they brought up, and again, trying to do them without doing layoffs. The next one was school closures they talked about. So like the board had to do in 2002, when basically there was a change in the way taxes were brought with Diablo Canyon. So that's when the district had to shut down Sunnyside Elementary School, Morrow Elementary School, and the old Pacheco Grand Avenue site. So it was another thing that they talked about, right? So we currently, and if you click on the small neighborhood elementary schools, that gives a list of the schools that we have in the district and actual size. And so we have small elementary schools, neighborhood schools within our district. So 300 to 400 students at most all of our elementary schools, which is a small school. So there are pros and cons with having small schools. And going back to the class size slide, when you basically raise class size, what you should know is what it does at the secondary level, or junior high and high school, is it has the impact of potentially cutting certain programs. So if the classes that only have 6 to 10 kids, those might be cut first, versus at the elementary level when you raise class size, what happens is the potential for combination classes. In particular, because we have these small schools, where you only have 1 or 2 teachers per grade level. So in terms of looking at closing at schools, of course, this is one that is very highly heated. People become upset about even thinking about their school, the impact that it has on their community. So the pros and the reductions that potential come out of this $600,000 per site, well, that money comes from basically, you take 2 small schools, you make 1, right? So you only keep 1 principal. You only keep the 2 secretaries. Custodial time is close to the same. And so there are reductions in those administrative and classified personnel costs in shutting down a school, right? When you have a bigger school and you raise class sizes, you're not going to have the combination class issue. There's potential other expenses, running the campus, water, gas, electricity, those types of things, plus the potential of raising revenue if you have this empty site that you could lease out. Again, the cons, the negatives, probably far outweighs the pros in this. And this is, to us, and talking to Dr. Prater and the school board, this is probably one of the last resort things that we would go to in terms of looking at cutting fees. That said, so again, why? So the cons, it has a huge negative effect on neighborhoods if you close their neighborhood school. The other thing that may happen too with this is there's some negatives that happen, right? If you close a school, you're going to have to bus those kids to another school. So potential increase in transportation fees and personnel costs. In today's society, especially in California, we also see a lot of charter schools pop up. So there is the potential that if we decided to close a school, that school and that community could charter up, become a charter school, which, like Bellevue Santa Fe, basically our revenue, some of our revenue goes to Bellevue Santa Fe. So this, if we closed the school and it became a charter school, they would potentially be taking revenue with them. So you have to look at that dynamic of, is it really going to end up being the savings if, again, they would charter up. So the next item that the Blue Ribbon Committee talked about was looking at capping healthcare. So currently, the school district, San Luis Coastal, is the only district without a healthcare cap with their employees. Again, these both things that I'm going to talk about now are negotiated items. So they're not things that the board can just do tomorrow. They would have to be negotiated with each of their labor groups. So at San Luis Coastal, we have the Teachers Association, SLCTA. We have 2 classified unions, CSEA and SEIU. But they did say, in terms of looking at potential savings, and if you look at we have a 10-year budget, which was on one of the first slides, which kind of shows the impact that the increases in STRS and PERS is having, along with the increases in healthcare. So as everyone knows in the community, anybody watching this presentation right now, we all know how much healthcare has gone up over the past 5 years. And that doesn't look like there's any relief in sight. So from now, for the next 10 years, it looks like that cost to the district is going to rise another $3 million. So trying to cap healthcare is one of the things that the Blue Ribbon Committee said we should work on with our unions, as well as, again, end of the day, if we have to go there, and in terms of getting our budget, revenues, and expenditures together, looking at the salary schedule, potentially salary cuts. However, as you'll find from the other slides, again, pros and cons of those things is that here we are making teachers, and people, staff's working conditions tougher, and then you're also talking about cutting pay benefits, right? So that doesn't really go over very well. So, but these are things that would have to be negotiated as we go through the process. So this Blue Ribbon Committee of individuals, like I said, key people from Morro Bay, Los Osos, San Luis Obispo, that were tied in to do this. At the end of the day, basically they said, hey, listen, keep these things in mind now when you're looking at revenue and cost containment. So, number one, right, it's nobody's fault that this has happened. So the fact that Diablo Canyon is closing down over time is not anybody's fault. But it is everyone's burden, right? Our schools and the importance of our school district within our community is incredibly important, so we all need to work together to solve this issue. Realize that any of the things we talked about today will have a dramatic impact on people. So there's no doubt that by having to cut these dollars and get to where we need to do to balance our budget is going to be difficult. It's important that this be a community-wide decision. So they say, hey, get out there, have forums, talk to people, make sure they're aware of what's happening. And so that's why I'm doing this presentation. That's why we're videoing it today, so that we can tie in and make sure people understand where we're headed. And then lastly, there's probably not one thing that we talked about today that's going to solve this issue. It's going to be a combination of those revenue and expenditure cuts that are going to have to come together to have this plan. So the goal is for you to hear the presentation, go through the slides, look at the 10-year plan. You can kind of see the projection of the budget that's there. And then hopefully fill out the survey for us. Give us some feedback, some information, so that we can compile all of that. We'll share it on the website. And then we're going to meet with the Board of Education. We're going to talk to them to kind of set a course over the fall, where we'll continue to have more community input, more community forums. But ultimately, by next January, February, we have a plan for the next $3 to $5 million in reductions that we might have to make. So again, we're only doing that plan based on what we know today. We don't know if the economy is going to go into a recession. We don't know if our property tax increases that we built into the projection are correct or not. We don't know if the state legislature could get rid of basic aid school district status or not. There's a lot of unknowns. We don't know if Diablo Canyon will close early, and we'll lose that unitary revenue very quick. So we're just trying to do this plan based on the facts that we know today, and trying not to make it too crazy, too insane in terms of where we're going. And then ultimately, this plan would be something that hopefully we would be able to do over time. So, and we would only make the reductions that we had to make during that fiscal year, during that school year. So that is the backdrop of the community forum presentation. Again, sharing the Blue Ribbon Committee recommendations with you, and hopefully it's been informative and will help you complete the survey that you'll find right at the front of our website. Thank you.